In our up-to-date world, machinery-wise, especially in the digital age, there seems to be an accepted fact. I'm not sure I ever read it put in these words, but I know what I've seen a few things around the edges of this, and so this will fit in. That there is the belief, it's an accepted fact, that in a real good medium, the retrieval, then the transmission of information, that the medium should not be interfering with it. Not adding noise, not adding spurious data, and etc. Does everybody follow me? I'm going somewhere else. But, talking about the 3D world of you and I might add, is not as true with machines as they would believe right now. But, in the world that would interest you, in the world that has to do with whatever this is, I want to point out to you that there is no such thing. It's not possible for there to be a totally passive medium simply transmitting energy, information. There's no such thing possible. When you get into the 3D world, as far as ordinary consciousness can see it, what you're dealing with is all such mediums that are going to transmit information. They all become active forces, and they produce their own unexpected and normally unrecognized information. Now, as you know, we're not worried about your PC at home or some mainframe where you work. We're talking about people now. I add, as strange as it may sound, it is true outside the area of just people. But with people, what we're dealing with now is normally unrecognized, such as, if you ask somebody a question, and you say, do you have any information about this area? And if they say, yes, I was there, and you say, all right, would you tell me so-and-so? Just the fact. Just tell me what happened. And they tell you. And you say, that's all. Now, you tell me exactly what you observed. And they say, yes. It's not possible. It is not possible. May I repeat that? It is not possible. It's not possible mathematically. I'm not going into that because you know by now I can always prove it mathematically. I can prove it in the kind of reflected geometry. It is not possible. There is no such thing as a passive medium. If it is acting apparently as an observable, usable medium, it is active. It is always active no matter how it appears. But do you follow what I'm saying? And I was not just trying to make up a singular example, such as, I don't mean that you ask a person, what did you observe about this occurrence that I'm interested in? I don't mean that you picked out somebody biased. I don't mean that you ask a Mets fan, what happened to the game today? How'd the team look? I'm talking about what appears to be someone who would be fairly disinterested, someone who would qualify as being a reasonable media to transmit some information to you. Passive. They're just going to relate what's going on, what they observed. They're going to report back to you like the scout. Nothing else. It is not possible, and no one recognizes it. Now you understand, of course. May I remind you out of town, if you've gotten over worried about Twisted Sister. The real heart of this is not simply in some way me pointing out the questionable dependence you might have on taking information from other people. Take it internally. There seems to be, ranging all the way from your immediate experience as to what did I just see, to the retrieval of, so what do you people call it, memory. That I have no reason, of course now I'm adding because people do not question it in this way. The human organism is not wired up to do this naturally. But if somebody says, hey, do you remember so-and-so? Do you remember such and such person? Do you remember such and such occurrence? And your memory somebody perhaps brings that up externally and it triggers you and you go, ah. And you begin to report. You begin to remember. Apparently acting as a passive medium. That your memory, the operations, the neurochemical operations of your own brain, what the hell does it care? It has no opinion. It's got no feeling about anything. And somebody says, do you remember so-and-so? You go, yeah, I do. Although it's not analyzed this way, I want you to try and follow, as long as you're going to the trouble of being here, and watching this tape, that it could be said that by all appearances, once it's described, that you're dealing with a passive medium, that your memory is just going to retrieve the information. It is not possible to have a passive medium. If it is operating as a medium, it is active, and it is producing its own unrecognized, unscheduled information, and no one sees that. Of course, at the 3D level back in the sea, no one sees it because it's not true. But it is correct that the medium is always active. It is always producing its own information. It produces a kind of floor noise. It produces a kind of spurious line of overtones, and no one recognizes it. And it cannot be otherwise. Does this give you any hint, in case any of you still have any faith whatsoever in your old city-bred self? Does that about do it? But internally, what seems to be the kind of information flow between the circuits, what seems to be the information flow between the, at least passingly ephemeral feeling that there is somebody in charge of me, there is a king, there is a ruler right now, and there's information going on between him and the rest of me. How about all desires, apparently, that you're wired up that you should be doing other than you're doing? All desires to change. They all seem to be very straightforward. There doesn't seem to be anything outside an almost chilling, pristine message. You got some bad habit, becoming an alcoholic. The message seems to be quite clear that there's an outcome, that there is business possible, and the outcome of the business should be to quit drinking. Apparently something in you is operating as a medium that I should be changing, and then here's one particular area. There seems to be something under discussion, but the unsaid part is, if I can jog your memory from a couple of meetings back, when I ask you the question, do people actually talk about what they have experienced, or does it end up that they talk about what they think about they have experienced? That is tied exactly to what I'm trying to point toward tonight, that all operations, all mediums, produce their own unrecognized, unexpected, unaccountable information. And it's always there. Always. And people wonder why 2 and 2 do not equal 4. Or some of you wonder why 2 and 2 do not equal 5 or 3. And there it is. There is always information in the machine that is totally unexpected, completely unaccounted for, simply never recognized. If there was such a thing as a passive medium, what would it be? I got a second, think about it. What would it be? That you put rutabagas in one end and it comes out rutabagas, just like it went in. That would be a purely passive medium, would it not? Now the question is, why the hell would you want that? Not just you, of course. What would life do with that? What would be the purpose of a purely passive, an absolutely clean, pristine medium? What would be its purpose if you're going to get out exactly what you put in? And of course, I hear some people in the city saying, well, doesn't make any sense. What's the difference? Makes a lot of difference. If you get a glimpse of it, then you could allow me or force me to ask you, well, what's the sense in even thinking about anything? What's the sense in remembering anything? When it's going to be colored, there's going to be spurious information, and you cannot account for it. It's not expected, and under ordinary conditions, you cannot accommodate it. And all information seems to be, to some degree, all of the information that comes through whatever medium, your memory, your recollection, your observation, your instant analysis of it, all the way from that to other people's apparent input to you. There's always spurious information to the point that nothing is reliable and it verges from always either being disappointing or surprising. In what amounts to a negative sense. This is not what I expected. What's all the noises downstairs? Is that just off the street? Ah. Our new tenants? Tell them to watch it. Tell them I'll come over and tell them that bit about Twisted Sister. Can I at least encourage you to consider that all information apparently going on internally in you, all the way from your stomach apparently. Let me get real crude and material. Apparently your stomach's sending messages about, hey, I wish you wouldn't eat over, apparently, 2 half gallons of ice cream at a sitting. All the way from that to somewhere down in your mid-circuits of saying, boy, you should treat people better. Boy, you should call your mother more often. Boy, you should not have the blues and be so discouraged. And there seems to be, no one ever accounts for it, no one discusses it, no one analyzes it. The question as to whatever the source be, apparently it's in you in the city. People, they take their own credit. You remember all their ideas of having a soul and an individuality and a subconscious. That apparently within them are sources of information. And sources of information always apparently to drive people, to motivate people. I got to get up, I got to do this. I should be doing such and such. But no one questions if it indeed was a direct transmission, if you indeed were the source of it. I just give you that for a second. If you indeed were the source, no one takes into account that there is a medium going on. That's the basis of the idea, part of the basis of all the idea that humanity has a goodly part and a badly part. And now that humanity has a consciousness and a subconsciousness. Or else internally there would be no such ideas as I thought, or I talked to myself. I used to tell myself. You couldn't say that. There'd be no partnership. You would be a solid entity inside, and you would be, if you can push the limits of consciousness right quick outside the 3D realm, it would be that you would be, in one sense, as stable as a dog, but you would be conscious. But you would know you're a dog, you would know you're conscious, and you would know you're stable. And so there you are. But there is apparently this internal communication going on. In whatever time zone you were living in. But there seems to be inside of you messages arising from somewhere, and they're talking to some other part of you. The old Smith and Jones partnership. No one questions what is taking place in the transmission itself. How much noise can get in? Nobody ever thought. It's just going from, I don't know, from here to here, or it's just going from here to here, or from here to here. It is not possible to have in the 3D world a passive medium. If a medium is in operation, it is producing its own information along with whatever's going on apparently. It is producing it. It's simply a fact. Being as upset as I am about that matter I told you, I may just leave that part with you for the night. Is that picking up? How about this? There is a way in which, also of course unrecognized, that life leads humanity in a form of analyzing, planning what would seem to be change by the certain notion I've pointed out that is within itself specious of there being an out there being some sort of environmental reality that is separate from you. separate from humanity. But an additional aspect of that, and we're in the midst of a great example now in our part of the world, is the widespread denunciation of smoking. Now here's how it works, and none of you have ever looked at it this way. That's just, of course, just one example, but I'm just pulling out one that is current. You now have a large segment, a sizable segment of life's body, at least in our time zone, our part of the planet, that is now roundly condemning the addiction to nicotine, to smoking. Now, apparently, if we were ordinary city-bred people, and that's all you had, then apparently, let us say that there you are, and let's say you're a smoker, or at least you're observing it. Apparently, then, the environment, I guess instead they'd call it now new cultural influences based upon new information, blah, 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 now is condemning smoking. But think about what's going on. You cannot perceive any greater reality if you're left with 3D consciousness, because it simply seems to be in direct conflict and proves again that I am incorrect, that, well, it just shows that there are environmental influences. But tut-tut. Think what is actually going on. What you have, even those of you, I know how hard it is to sit momentarily and become aware anew all over again that there is no environment separate from you. There is no environment warehouse. Sam Walton, Kmart, there is no place that humanity, individually, collectively, culturally, racially, nationally, there's nowhere to go get a bunch of environment. And bring it in and suddenly say, all right, you people, we're going to have some environmental impacts here, some new ones. But at any rate, even if you can't get back to that feeling right quick, then just start off right now with the immediate verbal premise that you know is correct in your more lucid moments, that there is no such thing as an isolated environment. All right, from that, here's what you've got to push your consciousness. What life is doing is it now has humans condemning their genetic progenitors for their already genetically adopted behavior. What you have is another masterstroke. It's an attempt to genetically change behavior after the fact. Do you hear? It's part of life's body. Let's assume, those of you who don't know, I can assure you that nicotine is an addictive habit. So you got part of life's body condemning, how dare you people do this, and apparently it's the environment, apparently new information, cultural change, more awakened attitudes. You've got a bunch of genes put together that are called humans, including C. Everett Koop. And there's this group of genes that are put together in an organism that looks like other humans that say you people shouldn't smoke. And the ones smoking have got the same genetic background as the ones condemning it. But it's like the ones not condemning it are saying we're smarter, we know better. Do you hear that from a 3D view, it's a part of life's body apparently attempting to alter the past? That is, the habit's already there. The behavior is already going on. I was afraid I'd lose all of you. See, if it's not the good rock groups waking up, it's you people lapsing back into 3D consciousness and thinking everything must make linear sense. What it amounts to, again, is the different time zones. What it amounts to is a different time operation between the lower circuits and the upper circuits. But at the 3D level, 2 minutes ago, I might have should have stopped because some of you got a glimpse. It literally amounts to, from a 3D view, it amounts to what would seem to be one set of genes in life's body attempting to absolutely alter the past, because that's what it's attempting to do from a 3D view. To condemn something that life's already doing. It's already been doing it. You understand, life, part of life's genes were smoking through men, before part of its gene says, hey, you shouldn't do that, from the 3D view. How can that be? They're going to alter the past. They're going to make changes after the fact. That one set of genes is going to in some way be able to travel back in 3D time and undo that which other sets of genes, going under the names of men and women here and there, have already adopted. The change is part of them. Well, I don't want to pick on you people. I guess perhaps it was a shock. Some of you, it was obvious when I told you. You didn't even know about Twisted Sister, so I guess some of you are not over there. Every attempt at the 3D level, ordinary consciousness, every attempt, every motivation, every desire that an individual seems to have that I should change, do you understand, in a sense, is an attempt to go back and to fool with the genetic past. It is not a case of, well, it's suddenly coming to me after all my years of reading and contemplating it, I realize I have a terrible temper and it's probably not good for me. It's probably causing stress. At least I know it's keeping me from being a more enlightened, civilized, New Age person, so I should do something about it. Do you hear me? Your anger, as you're calling it, this person, it's not something they acquired. Now, if they are typical sophisticated city people, they do believe that more or less they may have had some kind of slight inclination toward anger, but it obviously was brought about by the environment, the way they were treated. And that's just an accepted fact in the city now. So what they're saying, though, without knowing it is, I am going back and I am going to change the past. And even in the city, nobody believes that. That's why it cannot be analyzed in that manner. But what they're saying is, I am going back and undo to myself what my genes irreversibly, inescapably did to me originally. And now a new aspect of my genetic makeup, that the noise that talks inside, is now saying, hey, you shouldn't act like that. But the only way this continues to fly in the city, the only way it keeps all the pigs and the cows in line, is that there seems to be an escape clause. There seems to be a black hole within the life of the city even before they opine such affairs in the heavens. And the escape clause being, well, this is not the real me. What I am now, I was not always as you see me now. You do not know what I went through from the age of 7 till 9. And now what I'm trying to do is to, in some way, unravel that ball, that tangled ball of mistreatment and intrigue, subconscious traumas. Once you get a glimpse, like I said, I was giving all of you credit that most of you have had a momentary glimpse at least, that you see me using ordinary terminology, that I am correct. There is no environment. There are no environmental influences. What everybody in the city calls the environment is somebody else's heredity. Your parents, nobody. Your parents did not go out somewhere and come up with an environment, bad or good. They didn't have anywhere to go. So all of you have had some momentary glimpse of that. But do you see that it's impossible under ordinary conditions to keep a continuing awareness of this, and then what that does to apparently the transmission of information between people, between epochs in history, between large groups of people over time, or what appears to be immediate attempted communication, conveyance of information between families, between friends, between anybody. If it gets much further than somebody saying, hey, is that my foot? And you go, yeah. And they say, is that your foot? And you say, yeah. Other than that, you're asking for trouble, and except you don't recognize it. You know, especially they say, are you sure? Then people do not analyze it in this way, but then the medium is beginning to produce its own information. If some person comes up and says, I want to check a weird theory I heard about attempted direct communication. You say, okay, I'll play along. And the person says, is that your nose? And they touch it, and you go, yes. And they say, that's your nose. I touched right then. You understood the question, is that your nose? And you go, yeah. Everything seems fine. And then they say, are you sure? And you say, what do you mean? And they say, are you sure that is your nose? Well, you're already, some of you laughing. You see, the medium involved is now beginning to produce its own information. Except that is not the way in which it is analyzed. It then seems to people, if I suddenly jumped out and said, what's going on here? At first you were giving direct answers. The guy says, is that your nose? And you said, yeah. The guy said, yeah, I did. And he said, are you sure that's your nose? And you said, yeah. And he said, are you really sure? And then you started, something else happened. And then an ordinary person would say something like, well, I thought maybe I misunderstood the question. I mean, why did he ask me twice, 3 times? I thought maybe it's a trick question. Maybe I didn't catch the correct inflection in his question. What happened was the apparent transmission of information and energy. The medium itself is now adding its own unscheduled, unrecognized, unaccounted for, its own new information is being added to it. Now, at least any of you think this whole thing was, as always, in case you think, well, I found some other way to try to point out that life is arranged in a less than fully competent manner, nay. Do you understand, were it not for the fact that there is spurious information being produced by the medium itself, there would be no such thing as progress. There'd be no such thing as the growth of technology. There'd be no such thing as love. There'd be no such thing probably as fucking over once in your life, so take that. If everything went, apparently, from point A to point B, that somebody says, hey, is that your nose? You said, yeah. That's the last time you and them would ever talk. Probably. That might be the last time you ever talked in your life. At one time, now I'm playing with 3D reality, but those of you who can listen fast, it might be the one time, it might be the only necessary time that you engaged in purely passive, pristine, clean transmission of information. Someone says, is that your nose? And you, with no reservations, no doubt, no subconscious traumas, go, yes! The feeling will be so great that one time, finally, I engaged in pure transmission of information. That'd be it. You'd never speak again. No need to. You might die on the spot. But that's not what happens. Parents ask their children, did you do so-and-so? Yes, I did. Are you telling me the truth? Well, wife asked her husband, old man, where you been? I was working late. I called and you weren't there. Oh, nobody looks at it this way, but the medium itself is now producing new information in the apparent transmission of what was going on. What apparently people continue things going on, but then they always think, well, there is a ghost in the machine. There is spurious noise on the line somewhere. I'm getting wow and flutter from my turntable. The audio chain, the conscious chain, is breaking down. I need master cable instead of this cheap ripcord that I'm wiring up my speakers with. I need to have a better class of friend, a better class of lover. I need a better class of mother and father. Why is the whole world idiots except me? I know what I'm talking about, and everybody else, they get all confused. I ask somebody a simple question, you know, is blah, 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 and somebody say, yeah. And I say, really? And they'll go, well, I'm not sure. How come I can't get a straight answer? Because a straight answer would be a dead answer. It would be a cul-de-sac. It would be that something stopped right there, and that does go on in life. What I want you to see is on a larger scale what seems to be, and what people would say is the apparent purpose, what is the ultimate goal of pure communication between individuals, between groups. It's not so. If it were true, all it does is create a dead end wherever it was going. In many cases, that does happen, I'm saying. But the continued movement in the city, in part, is based upon the fact that the transmission of energy, of information between individuals, between organisms that are man and his institutions, as they're called, that all of these transmissions, if they continue to live, they are always adding their unscheduled, unrecognized new information to apparently what's going on. That is part of the city being alive, and it goes on in you. Were it not true, I'll go back to this kind of thing, because a lot of you, I can pull this kind of example on, and I get laughs, and all of you go, ah! But also notice you go, ah, and it's gone. It'll last about a second. That is, were it not for the fact that spurious, new information, unrecognized information being produced in all forms of communication normally, then you would say, well, I just read that there's 90% chance that you're going to die a deadly, horrible death if you smoke. And let's say I've read that 10 times by people that's got all kinds of credentials, and then there'd be no question about, well, let's say I think I'll go to a clinic, or I think I'll try to stop. Somebody just stopped smoking. Or somebody gets mad at their lover, and the person says, your temper is so great, so bad, no wonder you can't keep a woman, I'm leaving you. And let's say that the man is not ready to give up a sex life, to live alone, to talk to his cat. Then he might say to himself, well, hey, that's true. I've even told myself I got a bad temper. Of course, if this happened, it wouldn't even go any further than I've said now, so I'm already adding spurious information, but listen. Then the person would go, I know what I'll do. I'll stop it. And that'd be it. That'd be it. Never again would that person, by their account, behave as one having a bad temper. They simply wouldn't. If there was any possibility out in the city of there being my friend, my fictitious, reasonably insane person, it would be that way. Am I correct or not? If there was any reality in the city to intelligence, you would not have stop smoking clinics. You would not have battered women and battered men shelters. But of course, you'd have hardly any conversation. And I guess we might get along without missions, overnight places for drunks and battered people and the homeless. And I guess we could even get by with stop smoking clinics. But we could not get by without, you know what? Guilt. But were it not for there being new, unaccounted, unexpected information going on in all forms of transmission, there'd be no guilt. Because what it was that apparently you were trying to communicate to you in your own best interest, such as, well, you know what, I think my temper is a cause of dissatisfaction to me. Okay, I'll quit. That's it. And it does not happen. But that would be the nature of it. It seems to be a matter of indecision. It seems to be a matter, I've described it in several ways to you, tried to get you to look at it in certain ways, such as a temporary destabilization of the dominant submissive dance. It's a kind of lack of direct communication between the internal partnership. But the feelings of ambivalence, the feelings that I should be doing something differently, I should be changing in some way, and I can't seem to. There's a way in which it has never been observed that I'm describing to you tonight that is in the communication itself, that apparently you are telling you should not be doing so-and-so. How many times do I have to think this to myself? I know it's true. I think it over and over, and it's just burning me up. You know, the guilt over this, the pressure, the feeling I should stop is probably making me as sick as my temper or smoking or drinking. But you don't understand, it is not exactly the same thing over and over and over. And it's not because you in some way can't convince yourself. Of course, in the city they believe otherwise, or you would not have hypnotists, psychologists, subliminal tapes. But since I can't do anything, I know what I'll do. I'll buy me some tapes and I'll play them at night when I'm asleep, and they'll make me do it. I guess that's cheaper than believing in God and belonging to the church. But is that a great one or not? And there seems to be scientific validity to it that I'll spend. Of course, it needs to be a good chunk, you know, $395 for these tapes, and I'll wait till I go to sleep. I'll hook it up to a tape recorder that's, you know, got a clock mechanism, and I'll wait till I go to sleep, you know, so I don't have to hear it and fool with it. I go to sleep, and this $395 tape will tell me, you will quit smoking, you will quit smoking. It's great. And of course they don't work, but nobody cares. If anybody cared, you know, all the priests and rabbis and all the parents of the world have been strung up. And then, if there was one or two reasonable expectations of a revolutionist or even a would-be friend somewhere on the planet, he or she would then figure, all right, we about took care of all the other cronies and the crooks. He'd be surrounded, of course, by feet hanging from galluses and trees. But then, the final blow, he would have to figure, how can I get a noose around one part of my own nervous system, without killing the rest of me? Which is another way of saying, how can I cut down on the spurious information that seems to be going on, that I now finally recognize? It was not these other people that we went ahead and strung up. Sorry, it was not. It was not them feeding me faulty data, and that wasn't the problem. Let me skip to some more things since I only got half the tape on tonight's meeting. I like that being in charge, and now I say I only have half the tape, like I couldn't do anything about it. There's nothing more unsettling than a pseudo-humble king. Whenever even I don't like the sound of that, but I can pull it off. Since I only have half the tape, I'll skip right along. Has anyone ever noticed this? In the city, for you people on the West Coast in different time zones, I hadn't changed the subject. I just apparently do this. Because that way, some new information might slip in. Life arranges things in the city to where people have to discuss what seems to be their moral decisions. Now, I'm not, at least any of you fear, after all this time, I'm not fixing to speak on morals. But I want to start off with a good term that everybody understands. Sociologists and pollers and people like that constantly go through these little series of making tests having to do with people's apparent sense of morality. And one of them that I know is repeated, I see little glimpses of it a lot of times, is they'll set up a fake group of, like outside or inside a grocery store, and they'll catch, they normally, for years they picked on women, which is it's not that much of a sexual matter. But anyway, a shopper comes by, and they'll say, Madam, we got the TV camera and stuff here, and would you mind, there's a possibility you end up on television, and of course we usually get a year's supply of whatever it is. You say, yeah. And so what we want to do, this is a new kind of orange juice we got, and we're not going to tell you what, but we've mixed it in with some other juices, and we'd like for you to taste it. And we're going to run the cameras, and I'm just going to, I'll be out here with my hand or something, and I'll say, would you taste this? And you taste it, and then tell us what you think. And the little trick that they keep trying to do, and to come up with some kind of new information on their part, is they will lace it with prune juice. They'll put in salt. They'll do something to where the average person will taste it and won't go, ew. And so they'll say, well, you don't go ahead and taste it now, maybe your throat's dry, so that you'll be talking. And so the person will take a little taste and realize, this tastes like piss. And maybe make a little face, and the guy doing it will say, wait a minute, don't run the camera. Is there something wrong with it? I mean, if there's going to be something wrong with it, tell you the truth, and we want an impartial thing, but we can't use it. It's not going to get on TV. You're never going to show up if you don't like it. And the person will go, oh, no, there's just something caught in my throat. And so then they'll say, all right, we're rolling, they'll say, well, here, would you like to try and use so-and-so? And the person will drink it and go, oh, that's great. That kind of thing. All right. They run across this periodically, and it seems to strike those involved as being of real importance. Not just showing that people do anything to get on TV, that's not the point. But it's this. And they'll save it sometimes, and I know we've written studies about it. Just follow me. Even if I'm making this up, it could have happened. And now I made it up, it's happening right now. Is they'll get somebody, and they're apparently going to go along with this, and they'll grit their teeth, and they'll drink it, and say, all right, I'm ready. This does taste good. Or the guy said, doesn't it taste good? Think how your friends and family will be delighted to see you, and they'll go, oh, yeah. And so they'll say, all right, roll them. And they'll say, well, Miss Shopper, would you like to try this? And the hand will come out and drink it. And they'll find people periodically, they'll try this, and finally they'll say, wait a minute. You might as well turn off the camera because I can't do this. This stuff is horrible. Now, I just can't do it. My sense of morality will not let me do this. They find that interesting. But notice this. The point of me dragging out that example is to try to slip it up on you. There is built in to the human organism at line level consciousness back in the city with ordinary people the inescapable, the simultaneous, the coeval existence of the absolute insistence that you must talk about your moral decisions along with their apparently being such. Do you want a second? Can you push your consciousness way outside circa 1988 and outside of grocery stores and orange juice testing? History is replete. There's even a lot of them throughout history. That when there seems to be those who write the histories, that part of life's body that finds that there were things that has happened that's of great, then they say things like social, psychological, religious, environmental, cultural significance that happened. They're turning points wherein humanity, perhaps being epitomized by an individual or maybe some group, but there were turning points wherein a person or a group stood up and announced foursquare for some great moral decision they made. The ramifications of such still being felt today. That only those apparent moral decisions of any importance if what? If somebody stated it, if somebody said it. Now the two quick body blows I want to slip in on you, if not one to the nose, is life continues to talk to itself through man to remind itself what it should be doing. The second thing is, the few people here and there that I am, for the time being, referring to as the would-be revolutionists, people involved with this, are cheating life because they refuse to do it. Or they are over-encouraging life. But as I have hinted, you've got to be, of course, come to it yourself. You've got to understand that you can't just take it by me saying it's a fact or me going to present you with that spurious revolutionist code of conduct that we read once. But I will go ahead and point out that you would come to it yourself. Forget modern or your present ideas of morality. Just things that you would do or not do, not based upon your understanding of morality or mores or religion now, not at line level consciousness. But I'm saying in a revolutionary sense of your own nervous system getting activated beyond where it is now, where it would have ever done in this life. And there becomes things that you simply can or cannot do. I will go ahead and assure you, you would never tell somebody. You would not announce, well, hey, I can't do that. Never, never, never. And if you did, which you couldn't, but if you did, I'll find you and I'll kill you. I'll humiliate you. I'll run you out of this business. You'll never do that again, but you wouldn't do it. Never. So what's going on? That life forces humanity. Individuals all the way from the housewife saying, wait a minute. You know, I can't do this. I guess I'd like to be on TV. My children would enjoy it. But I cannot morally stand here and tell you that I like this and go through with this facade because this stuff is terrible and I don't like it. And I morally cannot do it. Now, at the city level, that strikes people, not just these sociologists, not just undergraduate students flaying around with some paper, but it strikes people. It strikes you historically. It'll even strike you in a movie to see a John Wayne playing Genghis Khan, if you've never seen that. Or what was the great one? Tony Curtis playing, I forget who it was, Marco Polo or somebody with a Brooklyn accent. But anyway. But historically, just in your mind, not just in a movie, but it strikes people in the city that, hey, wait a minute, here comes the good part. That the hero, historically, are just in the movie. The guy says, wait, there's a line past which I will not be pushed. I cannot morally allow this. perhaps at risk to my own welfare, but I cannot do it. And it seems to be great. I am telling you, the reality of that, those who can actually do it, those who can gain from it in this lifetime, would never tell anybody. And I know this is not a question. Some of you, I can put it in words, and you already taste exactly what I mean. If you did it, it would ruin the whole damn thing. That's just a crude way of putting it. Because the real way is you couldn't do it. If you did, it'd be worse than any of your ideas back in the city of sin or immorality to actually tell somebody, wait a minute, I can't do that. Because I don't, that's just not right. How are you going to tell your inferiors what you're going to do? And if you tell yourself what you're going to do, you're talking to your inferiors right there. If there was, and of course there is a reality to morality behind the words, but what it is that you would or would not do, you would never tell anyone if you reach the point that you understand what to do and what not to do. You would never tell anyone. Never. Is that unnatural enough? I'll throw you in a freebie tonight. I'll tell you something else. Because some of you, I know, still believe you have such serious questions. Sometimes some of you write me or send me notes and try to ask me about certain forms of behavior. Should I do this or should I not? If a real revolutionist, if somebody getting close to having a new end of the nervous system beginning to warm up, had a question about, well, should I really do this or should I continue doing what I've been doing, whatever it was? And let us say that you didn't have an immediate real feel as to whether, is it that important? Do I have to give it up? Or I just seem to begin to question it. I will verbally go ahead and give you an answer. Is you would ask yourself this. Say, I don't care what it is, but in some way you understand what seems to be your question had to do with some particular thing that you thought was questionable. Should I do it or not do it? The verbal freebie for the night is this. The real revolutionist, or the would-be, would ask himself or herself this. All right, if somebody caught me doing this, if I got found out, there are two possibilities. And which would it be? That I would be embarrassed, ashamed, or I'd be pissed. For those of you not listening, that was the end of it. A continuation of a few things that are still tied to this. You remember from the last meeting, I was using the metaphor of the king and the people, that is, of some part of you and apparently the rest of you. A form of your own, another form of your own partnership in the submissive dominant dance. And among several things, the last time I was pointing out that the king doesn't get ulcers, he gives ulcers. You remember that? If he was a real king, if he was a real ruler, I also want to point out he does not have to impress anyone. A real ruler does not have to brag to be a hero. If you recall from last time, I was pointing out that you've got no business having any mortal, any human as a hero. A real king, a real regent would never brag. He would never call the people around and say, oh, by the way, I guess most of you heard by now, we did conquer so-and-so last week. I'm the one that sent them there. It was my plans. In fact, I own you people. You're my army. But I want you to know we just trounced them good. I guess, a few of the generals, when they get back, you might throw them a rose or something, but remember who sent them. Remember whose idea it was. That's not a king. That's nobody in charge. Man's a sucker. He's in line with the rest of them. He may have a crown, but it's a middle-class crown. He got it from an Avon woman. That is not a regent. He does not have to brag to be a hero. And he does not try to impress anybody. Because, as I also pointed out, if you recall, you should never, ever, just as a last-ditch stand, if I had to give you a free verbal one last time, don't ever be impressed by anybody that gives the slightest indication that they want you to be. Just trust me. I don't care what they seem to have. I don't care what kind of information they seem prepared to transmit. If you got the slightest idea that they want me to be impressed by them, forget it. A king does not have to impress anybody. Remembering that in the great land of 4D metaphors, that I may verbally not be talking about what you hear in your ears, let me add another one about the king instead of just an update from last time. Let me tell you another one about the king. You should never raise your hand to a king unless you're going to kill him. But is that the nature of what goes on internally with people? If it was, there would be no internal discussion going on anymore. Or all your discussions would amount to a single sentence, so quick, so fast, that there was hardly any time, any opportunity for any sizable amount of new spurious information to be added. That if you'd raise your hand, that I've had enough of this, I'm going to do so-and-so. If you're going to raise your hand to the king, you better kill the son of a bitch. You surely understand metaphorically out in the real world. You do not go up to the chief of police. You do not go up to the president, to the local head honcho of your village. And don't strike out at him. Don't raise your hand. Don't kick him. If you're going to raise your hand at all, you better go ahead and kill him. Don't you understand? Because if you don't, suffice it to say that you're probably in for an uncomfortable weekend or so. No one will, because you're not prepared to, you're not wired up to be that way. But people will not take that kind of attitude. They cannot toward themselves. They always believe that I need more information. I need more scouts. I need to watch myself more. What I need to take a new self-help course. Well, what seems to be your real problems with yourself? Well, I smoke too much and I got a bad temper. Well, stop it. Well, yeah, but you don't. I've been working. There's a new kind of analyst here in town, and we're trying to get back to some of my childhood memories. I'm trying to change behavior that got me wired up to a car battery. From the viewpoint of doing this, it is as though a person's living a life, as the Chinese, I think, some of the soldiers, not General So, who was from another part of Mongolia, even past outer. I think I referred to him originally as Chinese, which was incorrect. But there is a point past all of that, but as they used to call it, dying the death of 1,001 little bitty cuts. And that's the way people treat themselves in the city. That is what helps keep life alive through humanity. That is what keeps people off balance. That's what keeps the dance spinning around. But apparently people are going to raise their hand to the king. People constantly do it. How many people, to use the crude examples, get up every morning after another night, after 30 years of heavy drinking, look down, and they got a fishbowl on one foot. They're halfway stuck in a tuba, laying in a locker room somewhere, and they're not sure where it is. And as soon as their tongue internally will move at all, it says what? It says, boy, enough's enough. I got to stop this. It is as though continually. In this case, it seems to be an unruly king, the king that makes me get drunk. And so it's like you take your little glove, or that you're going up to the king and you're going to flip him, or you're going to take your hand like I've had it. And you can't do that. If you're going to raise your hand to the king, you better go ahead and kill him then. Because look what's going to happen. You know what's going to happen out here, but you don't know what's going to happen internally. You take it as being life. You go ahead and believe that perhaps you should be singing background with Sinatra, that, well, it's just life. Maybe things will work out. Yeah, maybe they will. We're going to flip the tape for a second, and I got 2 or 3 more minutes. I want to talk to you people. Consider an epilogue out of town to take the children and the newcomers and invite them to go out. I hear again that some of the people who are watching these tapes in other times and other places periodically ask you people who run the groups in the other cities about, why do we have to leave the room? All right. You know how depressed you were to hear about Dee Snider and Twisted Sister earlier? The kind of stuff I talk to these people about makes that look like a party. So, go ahead and switch the tape and do our... Well, you don't have to. That's right, just let it run. We're turning over the audio tape, so you consider this the end of the public meeting for a few seconds out of town, and then the Paradigmers, the Atlanta group's going to do... We have some people for tonight, John?
Yes.
Right. Second. Perhaps 2 or 3. A couple of things didn't get on the tape from our last meeting that I wanted to go ahead and let you people out of town get. There's no great explanation, but I did it after we cut the tape last Thursday. That was to encourage again, by all means, that none of you people should ever whine, complain, or even ask for mercy. And you remember the first one that I gave to a lot of you people about not ever making fist, unless, of course, you're doing something that requires it physically, that you're a physician with a hand. You should just take that as being a continuing excursion on your own part, as not folding the thumbs. I just happened to mention after the tape was over last Thursday to people here that there is a kind of upper story extension of that, physically speaking. That is, become aware of the fact, if it's true in you, of how much time you spend with your jaws clenched. Not necessarily enough that it shows out here, but that there is a clenching. It is like doing with your jaws what many people do with their thumb and their hand. And I pointed out that you cannot engage in any clenching of the jaws, no matter how slight, while you're smiling. If you can, now you can force it. Any of you who want to sit there right now and try it to see if I lied to you again, do it and then go look in the mirror or turn around to somebody next to you and you won't do it again. They will not let you on the street walking around